Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Raquel Welch is one of the most popular Hollywood sex symbols in the world, one of the most memorable pin-up girls of all time. Raquel Welch filled the void left by Marilyn Monroe and became Hollywood's top idol for much of the 1960s and 70s. Why was Raquel Welch famous for her bad behaviour in Hollywood? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. There's no denying that the greatest Hollywood sex symbol of the 1960s was Raquel Welch, who pretty much exploded in popularity at the time in movies like 1 Million BC, She Wore a Fur Bikini, and the British spy comedy Fathom. In the process, she did away with the image of the blonde bombshell that had dominated the 1950s. Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, for example, and ushered in a whole new kind of sexy that had a major impact on moviegoers, celebrity gawkers, and studio heads desperate to get her on the big screen. It was her appearance as Luana, the Fair One from 1 million years BC, that electrified the world. The photograph of her standing in a desolate landscape wearing her prehistoric bikini would become emblazoned on the pop culture consciousness. Raquel would instantly become one of the most popular women in the 1960s, and that image would follow her for the rest of her career. During the height of her fame in the 1960s and 70s, Raquel was the most photographed woman on the planet. Her image adorned countless posters, magazines and billboards all around the world. She was the ultimate fantasy woman that men dreamed of while lovingly staring at her shapely figure in bikini poses. Raquel's legendary physique actually proved to be an obstacle. As she's made clear over the years, she for one never did buy into the whole sex symbol thing, despite what she put out there. Being a sex symbol was rather like being a convict, that I was locked in this image and couldn't get out, she shared with the media. My family was very conservative and I had a traditional upbringing. I was not brought up to be a sex symbol, nor is it in my nature to be one. The whole sex symbol thing is part of what I do as an actress. It's a kind of character I play. It's part of me, but not the whole me. For all her exposure, Welch never maintained a long-term big-screen career. She broke into films in 1964 with bits in A House Is Not a Home and Elvis Presley's Roustabout. The following year she appeared briefly in A Swinging Summer. Welch also modelled extensively to help pay the bills. In 1964 she became the billboard girl on TV's Hollywood Palace. Welch appeared in dozens of films over the years and had a contract with 20th Century Fox. Fantastic Voyage gave her a co-starring part in a hit movie, while the British-made prehistoric saga 1 million years BC was promoted with a poster that made her a household name. But while Welch proved to have screen presence and a sense of humour, many were more interested in her skin-tight costumes and bikinis, not her acting range. In the 1980s, Welch launched a cabaret act, taking it to Broadway and winning the lead in the musical Woman of the Year. She says she is most proud of the TV movie The Legend of Walks Far Woman, in which she played an Indian woman at various stages of her life. It was filmed in 1979 but didn't air until 1982. Since then she has starred in other television films, such as 1987's Right to Die and the 1988 Scandal in a Small Town and Trouble in Paradise. And she's still exploiting her figure with a series of best-selling exercise videotapes and accompanying fitness books. Raquel Welch was born Jo Raquel Tejada on September 5, 1940 at Chicago, Illinois. Her father was a Bolivian aeronautical engineer, Armando Tejada Urquizo, and her mother was Irish-American, Josephine Sarah. My mother came from a very well-educated family. She was very straight-laced, recalls Welch. My father had a strong Latin influence, which was very passionate, very temperamental, very highly emotional. By 1942, Armand, who worked as an aerospace engineer at Consolidated Aircraft Corporation, was transferred to General Dynamics in San Diego. The family settled in a small stucco house in La Jolla, 2 blocks from the beach. Within 2 years, young Raquel had been joined by a brother, James, and a sister, Gail. Her parents divorced later. Welch remembers that growing up in her household was tension-filled due to the volatile nature of her father. She would find escape by immersing herself in ballet classes and spending all of her free time engrossed in the flickering images of the silver screen. Going to her local movie house, she recalls, was like a transcendental experience. You could go into another world and invent another reality. Growing up in Chicago, her classmates could not pronounce her name, so they called her Rocky. Welch studied ballet and drama as a child and even won the beauty title Miss Photogenic, Miss Contour. While attending school, she was crowned Miss Fairest of the Fair in the San Diego County Fair. She initially wanted to be a ballerina, but gave up when her trainer told her that she did not have the right body for ballet. Speaking to the Sunday Post in 2018, she revealed she worked hard until I was 17, by which time I had grown quite a bit, of course, and my instructor broke it to me that I really didn't have the figure for ballet. Raquel became not only a star cheerleader, but also a straight-A student who was vice president of her senior class. She continued her dance lessons throughout high school, as well as performing in productions of the school's drama club. But while the other kids were spending their free time at the beach, Welch was already dedicating herself to a career goal. After marrying her high school sweetheart, James Welch, in 1959, within a year they became the parents of son Damon. Welch continued her show business aspirations and soon became the weather girl at a San Diego TV station, but the demands of her studies, family life, and television duties eventually took their toll, and Welch decided to drop out of college. By the time she gave birth to daughter Tani in December 1961, her marriage had begun to fall apart, and she and her husband divorced soon after. She decided to keep his name after their 1964 divorce in order to downplay her Latin heritage. With children in tow, Welch moved to Dallas, where she modelled for Neiman Marcus and worked as a cocktail waitress. She was hoping to begin a stage career in New York and was working her way east. But with only $200 to her name, Welch decided that she couldn't afford the cross-country trek and took her children back to California. She moved to Hollywood, where she began making the rounds of studios and talent agencies by bus and on foot. She eventually landed a couple of bit parts, including one in the 1964 Elvis Presley musical, Roustabout. Welch had resolved to not be relegated to simply eye candy in bit parts. A chance meeting in a Sunset Boulevard cafe shop with a young Hollywood publicist named Patrick Curtis helped facilitate her ambition. Curtis offered to manage her career and helped her land a modest role in a 1965 teenage beach movie called A Swingin' Summer, which prompted a variety film critic to remark, "It's hard to look away when she's in view." Welch's voluptuous beauty was soon causing a sensation in Hollywood. Before long she was invited to screen test at 20th Century Fox for the James Coburn film Our Man Flint. For reasons unknown, 20th Century Fox execs pressured her to change her name to Debbie. Thankfully she stuck to Raquel. Then word came that Albert Cubby Broccoli, producer of the James Bond series, wanted Welch as his next Bond girl. When Fox studio head Richard Zanuck got wind of the 007 offer, he swiftly signed Welch to an exclusive contract. Her first featured role turned out to be of microscopic proportions when Fox cast her in the 1966 sci-fi film classic Fantastic Voyage. By the time Fantastic Voyage became a box office hit, Welch was already in England on loan to British horror studio Hammer for what would become her film breakthrough, 1 Million Years BC. Welch's major break came in 1966's 1 Million Years BC, a remake of a 1940s Stone Age fantasy that established her reputation as a pin-up girl, a unique non-blonde bombshell, thanks to a best-selling poster of her in a revealing doe-skin bikini. The 5'6" beauty was suddenly an international sex symbol. Welch quickly learned, however, that being a sex symbol wasn't what she had expected. They really didn't want any other input from her. She had all these ideas and ambitions percolating inside, but nobody wanted to hear them. Raquel was quick to differ when it was suggested that Hollywood essentially gave her no choice in how she was presented to the world. In 1967 she and her children moved to Europe with Patrick Curtis, where she got film roles around the continent. Welch returned to the United States, where Fox quickly paired her opposite some of Hollywood's leading men, including James Stewart and Dean Martin in the bloody western Bandolero, and Frank Sinatra in his Tony Rome detective mystery Lady in Cement. In 1969 she teamed with football star turned actor Jim Brown in the controversial western 100 Rifles, which featured the first interracial love scene in a major motion picture. But then in 1970, Welch's risky decision to portray a transsexual out to conquer Hollywood in Myra Breckinridge proved to be a box office and critical disaster. Eager to try a new direction, Welch and her husband decided to produce her next film, Hannie Calder, but the box office reaction was less than stellar. Aside from being known for her sexy physique, Raquel also gained a notorious reputation of being one of the most difficult actresses in Hollywood. Horror stories about her temperamental behaviour, unprofessional attitude, and lack of respect towards others on film sets have become legendary and stuck with her through most of her career. She has been labelled as one of showbiz's biggest uptight divas, and there's no shortage of stories and gossip about her behaviour that demonstrates it. We got curious as to how Raquel gained this terrible reputation. It didn't take long to find some of the more famous tales, particularly revolving around the production of Myra Breckinridge. Let's be fair though, there are always two sides to every story, or in some cases more than that. In 1985, Barbara Walters interviewed Raquel. "You have a reputation of being difficult." "Not really, in some circumstances, but not everywhere." "Why?" "Well, why does anybody? You can't please everybody all the time. I think there are quite a number of people I do please, and I'm very much a perfectionist and quite demanding, but I'm worth it." It's quite easy to consider that she was unfairly labelled difficult for being so outspoken, resisting to go along with how others wanted to pigeonhole her as the sexy bombshell, and simply wanting to be in more control of her image and the direction of her career. When Raquel Welch was fired and replaced by an actress 15 years younger, she sued MGM and won. In 1981, Raquel Welch was an unlikely heroine in the fight for actors' rights. A few weeks into shooting MGM's Cannery Row, the actress, then 40, abruptly was fired from her lead role opposite Nick Nolte in the film based on the John Steinbeck novel. The studio claimed Welch's insistence on doing her hair and makeup at home rather than on set was a violation of her $250,000 pay-or-play contract. She immediately was replaced by Deborah Winger, then 25, as the movie's hooker with a heart of gold. At first, Welch said she'd go along with the change if she were offered another film role, but the studio, then run by David Begelman, declined. Then all hell broke loose. Welch filed a $24 million breach of contract suit. When the suit went to trial, Welch had a high-powered attorney in Edward Mosk. In his closing arguments, Mosk said the case was an example of arrogant corporate executives acting without regard for human beings. MGM's lawyer said the studio fired Welch because she was a temperamental actress who, if she could not have her own way, refused to talk to the producer and director. The jury sided with Welch, who reacted to the verdict by raising both fists in the air. 7 years later, an appeals court upheld the ruling in the bad faith discharge case and awarded her $10 million, $20 million today, $8 million of which was for punitive damages. Welch not only looked fabulous, but has managed to avoid the disastrous fate that befalls many Hollywood bombshells by reinventing herself as a business mogul, creating a popular line of signature wigs. One of the most memorable pin-up girls of all time, Raquel Welch filled the void left by Marilyn Monroe and became Hollywood's top sex symbol for much of the 1960s and 70s. As an actress and pop culture icon, she starred in 50 movies, winning a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a musical or comedy for her role in the 1973 film The Three Musketeers, as well as receiving a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Raquel Welch? Besides brains, Raquel could qualify as one of Hollywood's prettiest girls.